Okay na, sir. Open na po. Tapos, play ko na to.
Chico. You can call me Sir Chico. I finished my BS in Development Communication, major in Community Broadcasting in 2007, cum laude, and my MS in Development Communication, minor in Human Resources Management in 2013. I am the director of the Learning Resource Center. As director of LRC, I supervise and manage all our programs and activities here at the center.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Hermosa Ebron. You can call me Cheryl. I graduated BS Development Communication, major in Community Broadcasting here in UPLB in 2006. And currently, I'm taking my MS in DevCom as well.
Chico. You can call me Sir Chico. I finished my BS in Development Communication, major in Community Broadcasting in 2007, cum laude, and my MS in Development Communication, minor in Human Resources Management in 2013. I am the director of the Learning Resource Center. As director of LRC, I supervise and manage all our programs and activities here at the center.
Good morning, everyone. We will start in a few. So once again, in the meantime, here are just a few reminders to ensure that our meeting goes smoothly for this morning. So first, kindly mute your microphones during the webinar to avoid distracting the speaker and your fellow participants. Also, kindly comment if you can hear us well on your end, okay? And then second, keep your comments helpful and considerate to the speaker, moderators, and to your fellow participants. And thirdly, the speaker shall entertain again your questions only after the webinar through the question and answer function. And because we have a handful of attendees, like for Zoom, we have 800 registered participants, while for FB Live, as of this morning, we have 1,173 registered participants. So we will just select questions with the most number of likes. And for those who are joining us through Zoom, just kindly type in your questions in the Q&A function. And for example, if the question in your mind is the same with the question that you see on the screen, no need to comment your question, but kindly like the question or mark it with a thumbs up. For those questions with many likes will be chosen to be answered by our speaker. While for our FB Live attendees, feel free to comment down below our chat box or comment box your queries. Due to limited time, we will be only selecting a few comments, but rest assured, Sir Enzo, our speaker, will definitely get back to you and answer your questions in the comment box like what he did last session. So again, feel free to leave your comments or questions. You may take notes during the webinar, but rest assured that the question will be recorded via Facebook Live. Kindly check our FB page. It's fb.com/UPLBLRC, or you can search for our page UPLB Learning Resource Center, or you can directly go to the link www.facebook.com UPLBLRC/live. And then most importantly, guys, do not forget to answer the evaluation form right after the webinar to secure your certificates or e-certificates. The link will be shown by none other than Sir Enzo, our speaker, so make sure that you tune in, okay? Likewise, guys, please make sure that you indicate or indicated in the evaluation form a correct and working email, which means you have access to the email, you are actively using the email, you know the password to the email, and most importantly, your provided email is correctly spelled, because we found out a lot of emails were down, so that's why a lot of certificates were not able you were not able to receive your certificates instantly because you provided us with a down email or not working email. So if you provided us a incorrect or an incorrect email, you will not receive the certificate. So please make sure that you provide, again, a correct and working email. All right. And likewise, like what you're seeing on your screen, Professor Enzo or Professor Yambot is encouraging everyone to please download the examples or materials found in the link that's shown in your screen before the session starts, because those are important for us to be able to follow his demo and his discussion for today's session. All right, time check. It's 9:03 in the morning. So good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Cheryl Edp Hermosa Ebron. I am the University Extension Associate of LRC and also the training coordinator of the UPLB Learning Resource Center. So on behalf of our team, hashtag Team LRC, and our director, Dr. Benjamin Apology Floor. Welcome to LRC's webinar series entitled Making Sense of Data, a practical guide in analyzing and presenting your findings. So this is our second and last session on basic data management and analysis. Use Excel like a pro. So I will also serve as our sessions moderator for today. So for those joining us again, hi and welcome. For our first timers, thank you for joining. We are really glad to have you with us in our first webinar series. And we really have a lot of attendees ranging from all over the Philippines, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And also we have attendees from Myanmar, from France, from the United States, from Canada. We also have, I've seen in the registration form from Thailand. So it's really an international, what do you call that? An international event in this case. All right. So thank you for joining us. So to start with our session, allow me to introduce once again our resource speaker for the benefit of those who just attended this session. Once again, he is an assistant professor at the Institute of Statistics of the College of Arts and Sciences of the University of the Philippines Los Baños. He finished his Bachelor of Science degree in Statistics and Master of Science degree in Statistics with a Cognite and Information Technology in UP Los Baños. As an instructor in statistics, he is teaching several undergraduate courses in statistics ranging from statistical theory to statistical methods. In 2016, he was awarded as the 2016 Outstanding or UPLB Outstanding Teacher for the Physical Sciences Junior Faculty category. He was also given the 2019-2021 One UP Faculty Grant in Statistics for Outstanding Teaching and Public Service in UP Los Baños. Our speaker has served as a technical consultant for several institutions, such as Philippine Statistical Research and Training Institute, or PSRTI, Manila International Airport Authority, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, Southeast Asian Regional Center for Graduate Study and Research in Agriculture, or SERCA, and Strategic Research and Development Center Incorporated, or Strand Asia. He has also served or delivered several training programs to various agencies on topics such as data visualization, infographic design, building computer-assisted personal interview, systems using CS Pro, web page development, data management and analysis using MS Excel, gender statistics and analysis, and statistics and probability for senior high school teachers. Our resource speaker for today's session, please welcome the very young and very charming Professor John Lorenzo A. Yambot. Take it
Thank you,
away.
Ma'am Cheryl. Thank you, Ma'am Cheryl. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second part of our webinar series. So I'm very happy to read your comments or your feedback from our webinar last time. So I hope you will still find this webinar useful for whatever purpose you have in your mind when you attended this session. So for today's webinar, we have basic data management and analysis using Microsoft Excel. So actually, we have a lot of things that we can discuss under this topic. Just to level off the expectations of our participants in this webinar, for this webinar, we will be discussing the following topics. So for the first main topic, we'll have a very quick review of the basic concepts in statistics, but do not worry, I will not be showing any formula or any computations, okay? So I will just be focusing on the proper interpretation of the commonly used numerical measures that we compute whenever we analyze our data. For our second main topic, we'll discuss basic data management in MS Excel, specifically on how to create and edit a pivot table, and then the conditional formatting of data. For the third and the last main topic, we have basic data analysis in MS Excel. So we'll discuss how to write and edit formula, how to activate useful functions for data analysis, how to create and format charts, and finally, how to activate or use MS Excel add-ins for data analysis. So as you can see from our outline, this is not a statistical methods webinar. So don't expect that I will be discussing details about the t-test, about the ANOVA, because this is not the right webinar for that. So this is the webinar that will discuss how to implement basic data management and data analysis in MS Excel. All right. So for your learning objectives, at the end of this webinar, you must be able to, number one, utilize MS Excel to manage and analyze data. And number two, implement basic data analysis using MS Excel functions and admins. So, are we ready? By the way, I have pasted the link for the demo examples that I'll be using today in the Facebook comment or in the Facebook live comment section, and as well as in the chat box of Zoom. So I hope you are able to follow in our discussion using the demo examples that I uploaded. All right. So if you have difficulties accessing the link, again, please check if you have properly typed the link that was given earlier. All right. So I'd like to start my talk with this statement by Google's chief economist, Dr. Hal R. Varian, in 2009. He said, the ability to take data, to be able to understand it, to process it, to extract value from it, that's going to be a hugely important skill in the next decades. So data analysis or statistics in general shape how we view the world. Statistics tell us what to do, how to keep safe, how the economy is performing, what to eat, and in some points, statistics also tell us who to vote for. So it's very important that we know how to understand these numbers. And the webinar that we had last time told us that it is very important that we know how to communicate our data. Perhaps the main pickup point that we have last time is that less is more effective, less is more attractive, and less is more impactful. As much as communication of data is important, we must also put importance on how do we understand and extract value from our data. Especially now with big data, we expect that data and information will be real time, will be delivered as fast as we can. So, whether we are a data producer or a data user, it's very important that we know how to manage and analyze our data. So there are several tools available for doing such. We have complex statistical softwares. We have different machines like your calculator. Your calculator can perform basic analysis. But of course, we have commonly used tools like one that we'll be discussing today, which is the Microsoft Excel. But before we go in details with how we use Microsoft Excel in data management and data analysis, let me first have a quick review of what we know about statistics. So this portion is just a leveling off of our knowledge and skills in statistics, so that later on, when we will talk about the different basic concepts such as your numerical summary measures, every one of us would understand what we are talking about. All right? So first, there are several definitions of statistics, and these definitions actually point out to two main viewpoints in statistics. Statistics can be defined either in the science concerned with the collection, organization, presentation, analysis, and interpretation of sets of numerical figures. So basically, statistics in the singular sense pertains to the science. So prior to popular belief that statistics is a branch of mathematics, please always remember that statistics has its own science. It's a science that studies your data. It's the science that enables you to describe your data, to infer conclusions, and to make predictions about using the characteristics of your data. Well, on the other hand, statistics in the plural sense simply refer to a collection of numerical figures. So statistics used in the plural sense would simply refer to the numbers that you commonly read or that you commonly hear from news, such as the number of COVID cases, for example. That is the use of statistics in the plural sense. The gross domestic product, the employment rate, the proportion of poor Filipinos, These numbers, this pertain to the statistics that is used in plural sense. So, for a clearer perspective on these two viewpoints in statistics, let's have this example. So, statistics used in the singular sense, let's have this example. Statistics plays a key role in collecting and analyzing data to monitor the progress on sustainable development goals. So take note that for this example or for this illustration, the word statistics referred to it as statistics that is being used as a method. So it's a method that we can use to explore our data in order to fulfill a certain objective. And in this situation, it's the objective of analyzing and monitoring the progress on sustainable development goals. On another example, we have statistics in the plural sense. Let's have statistics show that unemployment rate rose to 17.7%, accounting to 7.3 million unemployed Filipinos in the labor force in April 2020. This is a record high in the unemployment rate, reflecting the effects of coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 economic shutdown to the Philippine labor market. So evidently, in this illustration, the word statistics pertain to a processed data. Specifically, it is the unemployment rate rather, which is 17.7%. Right? So, before I proceed with the next topic, let me check if my participants are still alert and are still subscribed to this webinar. So, we'll have again an interactive icebreaker. So please go to menti.com and use this link. All right. So please go to menti.com and use the code 810341. So I have two questions. Let us first answer this question. What did you have for breakfast? By the way, I read in the feedback of our webinar last time that I was advised not to use menti.com but instead Zoom poll. Please understand that we also have participants from Facebook Live who will not be able to join the Zoom poll. So that's why I prefer to have our icebreaker using menti.com. I hope you understand that point. Thank you. So this is a word cloud that actually says most of our participants had coffee, egg, bread. Ako po, I had longganisa for breakfast. Let's just wait till we reach 500 responses. So most actually said they have not yet eaten breakfast. So baka po kagagaling nyo lang sa tulog talaga. All right. So, okay. So please take note of this characteristic that we measured. It's the food that you ate for breakfast. Okay. So let's have another question. And this time, I want you to answer this question. What is your blood type? So if you are not comfortable with saying your blood type, don't worry. I included an option that says I prefer not to say it. So, by quick inspection, it seems that most of our participants have blood type O. Let's again wait for 500 responses before I end this icebreaker. All right. So thank you for participating in our icebreaker. So it's good that you are still alert and listening to our webinar, even if we have already started the discussion about statistics. Okay, so I understand that some people are really afraid of statistics. Okay, but let me take this opportunity for you not to be afraid of statistics. All right. So in our example earlier, notice that I collected two characteristics from all of you. And these characteristics are the food that you ate for breakfast and your blood type. Now, it's very obvious that for both characteristics, the observed value for each and every individual or for each and every participant varies, right? So some said that they ate egg for breakfast, some said that they had just coffee for breakfast, some said that they have a blood type O, some said that they have blood type AB, and so on and so forth. So again, these characteristics varied from person to person or from one individual to another individual. At the same time, these characteristics also vary, or some of these characteristics also vary from time to time. Would you agree? So, for example, the first characteristic that we measured is the food that you ate for breakfast. And obviously, that characteristic would vary from time to time. The food that you ate for breakfast today might not be the same food that you will eat tomorrow, and on the next week, and on the next month. However, your blood type, I suppose, it will not vary from time to time. If I ask you the same question tomorrow, I will assume or I will suppose that you will have the same answer, right? So there are characteristics aside from it varying from person to person. There are also characteristics that would vary from time to time. And these characteristics in statistics are what we call as variables. So a variable is an attribute or characteristics of the elements in the collection that can assume different values for different elements. And the realized value of this variable is what we call as an observation. So for example, for me, I ate longganisa for breakfast. So longganisa is an observation for the variable food eaten for breakfast. My blood type is AB, so that AB response is in observation for the variable blood type. While if I collect all the observations, that would now be referred to as data, right? So this time, I would like to focus on how do we classify our variables. And even with little knowledge in statistics, I know that you are familiar that there are two types of variables, and these are the qualitative variable and the quantitative variable. So as the name implies, quantitative variable measures a characteristic that can be classified into one of a group or of categories. In other words, a qualitative variable answers the question, what kind? Okay, what kind of characteristic are we measuring? So obviously, since they are represented as categories, qualitative variables cannot be measured on a naturally occurring numerical scale. But however, please take note that there are categorical or qualitative variables that take on a numeric form. But still, these numbers would act as labels or categories. So some examples of qualitative variables, we have the sex of the webinar participant, so it's either male or female. We have the language spoken at home, and the salary grade. If you will inspect, salary grade has a numeric form, but it's still considered as a qualitative variable because the category 11, 12, up to 33-2 is just a representation. It is just a label. Another good example of that is zip code, right? So zip code has a numeric form, but we use zip code to label a certain area, such as a certain municipality or city. So I hope we're clear with that. The next type of variable is what we call as the quantitative variable. And as the name implies, this is a characteristic that is recorded on a naturally occurring numerical scale. So in short, a quantitative variable answers the question how much or how many of this characteristic are we measuring. So a quantitative variable, please take note, it can be a result of a count or a result of a measurement. So in other words, we can classify quantitative variables, if you can recall from your basic statistics, as either a discrete variable or a continuous variable. If it's a discrete variable, it's a result of a count. If it's a continuous variable, it's a result of a measurement. So some examples, number of household members. That is a result of a count. We do not consider a fraction of a person. We do not consider a fraction of an individual. Okay? So the numbers or the observations that we get from this specific variable take the form of whole numbers or counts. All right? Well, the next two examples that we have, total annual income in pesos and floor area of dwelling unit in square meters, it refers to a quantitative variable that is a result of a measurement.
Hey, Sir
All right.
Enzo.
Sorry po. Yes po.
Sir, pa-share lang po nung screen.
Sorry. Di po nakashare yung screen.
Thank you.
Oh my God. I am so sorry. Okay, let me go back. So this is variable. So I'm sorry. So this is the variable that is an attribute or characteristic of the elements that can assume different values for different elements. And we have your observation, which is a realized value of a variable, and the data, which is a collection of observations. I apologize for the mix-up. Now, moving on, this is what I'm talking about earlier. So we have your qualitative variable, which is a measure of a certain characteristic that can be classified into categories. So as I've said earlier, the quantitative variable answers the question, what kind? Okay? So again, please watch out for qualitative variables that take on numeric forms. Does not necessarily mean that if a characteristic takes on a numeric form, it is a quantitative variable already. So there are variables in a numeric form that act simply as labels. Okay? And then the other type is the quantitative variable, which is a characteristic that is measured on a numerical scale. And as I've said earlier, it is the characteristic in which we answer the question how much or how many. And it can be a result of a count or a measurement. Okay, are we good? Let me first check. All right. So now, aside from classifying your variable in its type, we should also realize that the measurement process is a very important part of our data management and analysis. The way we measure our data will dictate how will we analyze our data. So it is very important that before proceeding with the management and analysis of your data, you know how the variable or how the characteristic was measured. And it entails us to classifying our variable to either nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. So let's have the nominal level. So a variable in the nominal level is simply a characteristic that gives names or labels to various categories. Now, if you go back to our definitions a while ago, this is simply a qualitative variable, right? But please take note that under the nominal level, the categories should be distinct, there are no overlaps, they are mutually exhaustive, and most importantly, the categories are of equal importance. So in other words, if you have a characteristic that is in the nominal level, that means the characteristics have no sense of ordering. So example, sex of the webinar participant, whether or not the household has access to safe drinking water, and language spoken at home. These are categorical or qualitative variables, but the categories are equally important. All right? Now, on the other hand, a characteristic that can be expressed in categories but has an implied ordering is what we call as a variable measured in the ordinal level. So, example, we have salary grade 1-1, 1-2, up to 33-2. So this only means that a person with salary grade 33-2 has a relatively higher salary as compared to a person that has a salary grade of 1-2. So in other words, you can rank or you can order the individuals or the entities in terms of these characteristics. Another one, rating of a newly elected government official, excellent, good, fair, or poor. So if you scored official A as excellent, while official B as poor, it's very obvious that official B has a lower rating. Okay? And the same is true with nutritional status, having values such as underweight, normal, overweight, and obese. Moving on to the next level of measurement, we have the interval level, which is simply a quantitative variable in which the differences between two consecutive quantities are constant. Now, it will now possess the characteristics of the nominal and ordinal level in such a way that we can tell how much is this value different from the other. But at the same time, a very important property of the interval level is that the value of 0 does not imply the absence of the characteristic being measured. So in other words, a variable in the interval level has no true 0 point. A popular and good example of a variable in the interval level is temperature, specifically if it's measured in degrees Celsius and degrees Fahrenheit. Now, come to think of it. If you report the temperature is 0 degrees Celsius, it does not necessarily mean that there is no existing temperature reading, right? So there is another interpretation of that 0 degrees Celsius temperature reading. So in fact, in science, we call that 0 degrees Celsius as the freezing point. And the same idea goes with the other example, which is IQ score. An IQ score equal to 0 does not necessarily imply the absence of intelligence. And the highest level of measurement is the ratio level. And it will now possess all the characteristics of the nominal, ordinal, and interval level variable. And more importantly, the ratio level variable now has a true 0 point. So again, what does a true 0 point mean? If the variable has a true 0 point, a value of 0 means absence of the characteristic being measured. Okay, can you still follow? So here are some examples. Number of health clinics in the municipality. If you report that there are 0 health clinics in your municipality, then there is really no observed value for that certain characteristic. And the same is true for the next examples, fisherman's catch for the day and total annual income. All right. So, can you still follow? Kamusta po? Let me check the chat section if everyone else is still doing good. All right. So, now, as we have said last time in our webinar on data visualization, a collection of data, a summary of data, say for example, in a table, is not enough or is not yet informative about the true characteristics of our data. Now, to fully describe our data, aside from visualizing it, we can also compute numerical summary measures. And in this topic, I will discuss some of the commonly used numerical summary measures. But as I have said earlier, I will not be showing formulas. I will not be showing computations. I will just focus on when and how to use these measures that we commonly compute whenever we analyze our data. So perhaps the most popular measure that we have are the measures of central tendency. So the measures of central tendency or the measures of center, or more commonly known as the averages, okay, simply tell us where is the center of our collection of observations. So there are 3 measures of center. We have the mean, the median, and the mode. So the mean is simply referred to as the numerical average value or the typical value. The median is the middle value of an array, while the mode is the value that occurred most frequently. Now, a very good analogy for the measures of central tendency is the one that you are seeing on the icon. Let me emphasize that. This one. What's this? This is a seesaw, right? The measure of center represents the fulcrum of the seesaw. So, and there are several ways on how we can interpret that fulcrum when it comes to the mean, the median, and the mode. Now, for the mean, it is said that it is the center of gravity of your seesaw. So, therefore, that fulcrum will move towards the direction where everything else balances. So, it will consider if there are relatively more low values or relatively more high values. So, in other words, it seeks that balancing point. Okay? Well, on the other hand, the median puts equal weights to both sides. So regardless of extreme values. Because as I have mentioned earlier, and as what you can see on this slide, the median is just the middle value. All right? While the mode, a very good analogy for this is the peak. Because once again, the mode is the value that is occurring most frequently. All right? So let's have this example. How do we normally see measures of center in our news or in our reports? Let's consider this report from the Philippine Statistics Authority that says, in 2015, the median age of the country's total population was 24.3 years, which means that half of the total population was below 24.3 years old. Now, let me point out some interesting insights about this report. Now, please take note that every time you interpret certain numerical summary measures and considering the type of audience that you have, do not just simply end with saying the median is 24.3 years, for example. As you can see in this report, that number was further interpreted. Again, if we are to visualize it using the seesaw analogy, the 24.3% is the middle value. So that means 50% is below 24.3 years and 50% is above 24.3 years. All right? Now, as you can see, there are several measures of center. You have your mean, the median, and the mode. Now, how do we decide which one to use? Do we report all of these measures? Now, please take note, there are several characteristics, data characteristics specifically, in which the mean is more appropriate to be used, the median is more appropriate to use, and the mode is more appropriate to use. Now, in statistics, please always remember that the mean is sensitive to extreme values or what we call as outliers. Now, a very good illustration is this one. If we have a perfectly balanced data, such as what you can see in the illustration, so there's an equal number of low values and equal number of high values, you will observe that the fulcrum would now represent the mean and the median. The median because obviously this is the middle portion of your seesaw or of your array. While it's also the mean because it's the center of gravity, because there's an equal weight on this side and on this side. But for a data set that is looking like this, where there are more high values as compared to low values, the median might still be found again exactly on that 50th or 50% marking. But take note that the mean as the center of gravity tends to be pulled in the direction of that extreme value. So in this case, since we have an imbalanced data and there are more high values, the mean is pulled towards that high value. So in short, be very careful when using the mean. Characterize your data, observe your data, explore your data. Check if there are extreme values or outliers. If there are, let's consider other measures like the median, okay, or the mode. The only problem that we have in the mode is this one. Again, think of mode as the peak. If all your data values are equally frequent, is there a peak? So I suppose there is no peak. So there is no modal value. So in other words, the mode may or may not exist. And another problem with the mode is if it exists, there can be more than one mode. So the bottom line is, or the key point is, observe your data before computing these measures of center. So if you have extreme values, I would not recommend you to use the mean. Right? So if there is a value that is frequently occurring, you can report the mode. But always take note that the mode does not consider all data values. So once again, use these measures of center with caution. All right. So moving on, let's consider this illustration wherein we have two dot plots. The first dot plot consider the ages of 13 subjects in medical study A, while the second dot plot shows the dot plot of the ages of 13 subjects in medical study B. Now, by visual inspection, let's characterize them using the three measures of center. The modal value is 60. It's very obvious for medical study A, and the same is true for medical study B. How about the median? If you carefully inspect the two dot plots, the median is also 60 for medical study A and 60 for medical study B. And if you'll find time to compute for the mean would be also equal to 60. So in other words, for both data sets, the mean, the median, and the mode are all equal to 60. But if you are to look at the structure of the data, it's very obvious that they are different. Do you agree? So the observations in medical study A are not too dispersed, while the observations in medical study B are very different. They are dispersed. So, what's the message or what's the key point? Now take note that your measures of center do not give you a full picture of your data. Again, as the name implies, it only locates your center. So in this case, there are instances in which you can seek the help of measures of dispersion or variation to fully characterize your data. And there are several measures that we can use. The simplest one is the range, which is simply the difference between the highest value and the lowest value, and implying that if the range is high, then the dispersion or the variation in the data is high. But you're using the range, or you should use the range with caution. Let's see this example. We have dot plot of the ages of 21 participants in training A, and here's the dot plot of the ages of another set of participants in training B. Now let's answer the question, does the range reflect the distribution of the data values? If you look at these two examples, the highest value is 38, the lowest value is 28. And the same is true for the data set using training B. So for both data sets, 38 minus 28, the range is equal to 10. So once again, use the range with caution because the range will not accurately reflect the distribution of your data values since it will only consider both ends of your data distribution. So if there are problems with the range, what else can I use? So perhaps the more commonly used measure of dispersion is the standard deviation. And the standard deviation is interpreted as the average distance of the observations from the mean. And as compared with the range, the standard deviation makes use of all their data values in the computation. But since it uses information coming from the mean, the standard deviation is also heavily influenced by extreme values. Now, let's focus on the interpretation. How do we interpret it? So as an example, Suppose the computed mean and standard deviation of the number of children in a household in Laguna are 4 and 1.7 children respectively. What does this imply? So perhaps the common misconception people have with standard deviation is that they just do mean minus plus standard deviation to indicate that that interval is the range of the values in my data set. Now, let me repeat that. So people usually interpret this as 4 minus plus 1.7. They are saying that the value that I will compute here is the range of values that is reflected in my data set. Now, please take note that this is not correct. Okay? Because again, how do we interpret standard deviation? On the average. Okay? Your data values would differ from the mean by 1.7. It does not necessarily mean that my full array or the collection of my observations would just be between 4 minus 1.7 and 4 plus 1.7. All right? So, if you have further questions about this, I would encourage you to read on materials that you can find on the internet or statistics textbooks. Okay? So, I hope that was a very good refresher of your basic knowledge in statistics. So, again, I proceeded with this discussion because later on, during our discussion on the data analysis, you will encounter terms such as your mean, your median, your mode, and your standard deviation. All right, so let us now proceed to the second main topic of this webinar, which is about basic data management in MS Excel. So I hope you are now able to download or you have downloaded the Excel file that I will use for our demo examples for today. So once again, it's session 2 examples worksheet. All right, so let's first have the pivot table. So actually, sa trivia po muna, pivot table is not a trademark of MS Excel. Okay? The word pivot space table is a collective term. It's a common term. But MS Excel, if you will notice, uses this term for their pivot table. Yung pivot with no space table. So in fact, when you see this, it's exclusive for MS Excel. But pivot table, again, so just for some trivia, it's not exclusive for MS Excel. Okay? Anyway, so when you're working with a large volume of data, it might be different to summarize them. So, to help you with that, a pivot table makes your worksheet more manageable by summarizing data, and at the same time, you can still manipulate your data. Now, here's a pro tip. If you have already a data set that is summarized, do not waste your time creating a pivot table. Or if your data source or your data table is very simple, say for example, you only have 5 observations with 2 characteristics, that's very easy to summarize. You don't need to waste your time creating a pivot table for a data that is very simple or a data that is already summarized. All right, so some reminders before constructing or creating your pivot table. In preparing your data source, make sure that all your columns have headings or column titles. Second, no columns or rows that are completely blank. So in other words, the cells in your data table should be contiguous. Third, no columns or rows that contain summary statistics. Okay? So perhaps a common practice is that here's the data source. People will compute the mean, the median, the mode, and other summary statistics below it. So pivot table will do it for you. And the danger with that is that Excel might consider those summary statistics as part of your data table. Okay? And the fourth one is that the data type in each column should be the same. So, for example, if your first column are ID numbers, so they should be either all characters or all numbers. If your second column consists of ages, it should all be numeric values. Okay? So, don't expect that Excel will easily detect in its pivot table if that value is a character or a numeric value. Okay? So as you can see, there are 4 considerations before you actually create your pivot table. So here's another pro tip. If you're spending more time restructuring and reformatting your data source, then maybe your data might not be fit to use for in a pivot table. All right, so uh, first things first, please allow me to shift to MS Excel. Okay, well, I'll do the demonstration. But don't worry, the slides that I will be distributing later on contains all the relevant steps and as well as screenshots. So if you were not able to follow in our demonstration, you can still refer back to my slides and repeat the steps that I demonstrated during this webinar. Okay, so as you can see, for example, in the steps in creating a pivot table, it's complete with the full steps and the screenshots. Okay, so I hope you're fine with that. All right, so I'll give you time to open. I'll give you time to open our worksheet that we'll be using for our demonstration. So it's session 2 examples worksheet in MS Excel. All right, are you ready? Okay, so let's first consider the worksheet named Employee DB or Employee Database. So it's the first worksheet. In fact, it's the active worksheet. If you will open session 2 examples workbook. Okay. Now, let us first inspect our data. So we have 6 columns. First column is the employee ID. Second column is job title. Third column is the department. Fourth is annual salary. Fifth, number of years. For context purposes, this is the number of years in service. And the sixth column is the job satisfaction rating. Now, let's check the types, the data types. Employee ID is composed of numbers and letters or characters. So basically, we can consider this employee ID as a qualitative variable. Job title, obviously, consists of several labels or categories. So job title is a qualitative variable. The same is true with the department. Annual salary, as you can see, it is a numeric value. And if you will observe the nature of this variable, this is undeniably a quantitative variable. And the same is true with the number of years in service. For job satisfaction, this is a qualitative variable. Specifically, it's of the ordinal type, right? Because there is a sense of ordering with regards to the categories of this variable. All right? So we have already inspected our data set. There are 6 columns. And if we count the number of observations, there are 49 observations. So there are 50 rows because we will include the column headings. Okay? Now, what are the steps in creating a pivot table? First step, click anywhere in your data table. So again, click anywhere in your data table. It doesn't matter which row or which column as long as it contains your data. So once you have already done that, please go to the Insert tab, okay? And on your insert tab, you will see on the leftmost command button, the pivot table button. Okay, so press that pivot table button. Okay, so rewind. It's on the insert tab and pivot table command button. All right, so as you can see, there's a pop-up window that asks you, where is your data table? Now, since you selected a cell that is in your data table, Excel will automatically recognize your data table. So that is why I reminded you earlier to select anywhere on your data table. Plus, your data table should have no skipping rows or columns. Because if there are skipping rows or columns, Excel might skip the next columns after that blank row or column, okay, in the selection of the data source for your table. Okay? Now, so let me just demonstrate what happens if you did not click anywhere on the table. For example, I clicked here. If I go to pivot table, notice that you need to select your data table. Okay? So it might be too tiresome for you. So a very good practice is click anywhere on the data table. So once you're done with that, so let me go back to my demonstration. So double check, yes, MS Excel recognized by my data table correctly. And if you explore the other options, it will ask you, where do you want your pivot table report to be placed? It's either in a new worksheet or in an existing worksheet. I think in practice, I would advise you to always put your pivot table report in a new worksheet so that you won't disturb or disrupt the current formatting of your data table. So if I'm already done with that, so new worksheet. So another worksheet should appear in your workbook and it should look like this. All right, can you still follow? So again, rewind lang po tayo. It's in the insert tab, click pivot table, and then if you click anywhere inside your data table, Excel will automatically recognize the data range. Okay? And after you're done with that, you should have this window. All right, so let's say, for example, I want a summary of how many employees have that certain job title. How many are managers, how many are laborers, how many are assistant managers, and so on. So, since that characteristic that we are interested in is job title, I will focus on this field, which is job title, and I will bring it to rows. So how do you do that? Simply, you just click on that field, job title, and drag it to the rows area. Okay, so I will repeat. So let me zoom to a portion of the Excel window. So that's job title, hold, and then drag to rows. Okay, so I hope you're fine with that. So as you can see, the active worksheet will change. It will now show the different values for your active variable, which is job title. Okay, now going back, I want a summary. How many employees are managers? How many are supervisors? And so on. So if that's the case, you need to find a variable that would describe each employee in your database. And that is employee ID. So I will click, hold, and drag employee ID to the values. Okay? So for context purposes, in pivot table, value simply refers to the values that you will summarize. So later on, we will explore, are we only limited to counts? Because as you can see, the default here is that pivot table counted the number of employees based on the job title. Now, focusing on our pivot table, you will observe that you already have a summary of how many employees are assistant managers, laborers, managers, and so on. Okay? Now, similar with your ordinary Excel worksheet, you can format your data table. So for example, I can sort this by sorting the number of employees in terms of job title from largest to smallest. I can sort the row labels, the job titles, say alphabetically from A to Z, and so on and so forth. All right? Okay. Now, in the next idea or in the next feature of the pivot table, now take note that I can add another column for this one. Say, for example, I also want, aside from the number of employees, I also want the average annual salary of these employees. So again, what I will do is to click and hold the annual salary field in my pivot table field and bring it to the values field. So if you scroll to the values field, you will notice that there are now two variables, count and the count of employee ID and the sum of annual salary. And if you will go to your pivot table, there are now two columns, the frequency and the corresponding sum of annual salary. But take note, you don't want the sum. You don't want the total annual salary. You want the average. So how do you change this? There are two ways. I'll show the first technique. So go to the values field in your pivot table field and then click this drop-down button under the sum of annual salary variable. So click this one and then go to value field settings. Okay, so once again, go to the sum of annual salary button in the values field, click the drop down button and value field settings. Okay, a pop-up window will appear showing how do you want to summarize your values. So since you want to summarize the value in terms of averages, so I will click average. And once you're done, click OK. So you already have your average annual salary. Are we good? Now, what if I also want the minimum and the maximum annual salary? Again, just click the annual salary, hold, and drag it to the values field. Okay? Click and hold it again to the values field. Okay? Now, you can just reorder this one, okay? But it will just take some amount of time because in some or depending on the screen size, okay, you will notice that it might be difficult for you to reorder your buttons. Okay? Now, that's the first technique that I showed earlier, clicking the drop-down button in the values field. Now, if you have already several columns or several buttons in this values field, perhaps this might be an easier approach. Now, go to the column that you want to change, the summary. So you just right-click and then click Summarize Values By. Okay? So once again, let me zoom in to that specific portion. So here's the column that I want to change. Say I want to change it to minimum. So right-click, Summarize Values By, and replace it with minimum. See? So I think this is this is an easier approach. Okay. Next column, change this to maximum. So click the column or any cell in that column, right click, and then summarize values by maximum. So that's it. Let me just check the chat box if there are questions regarding this. All right. All right. So now, so you already know how to add rows and add columns in your pivot table. Okay. The next thing that we will do is, what if I want to change my row category? Instead of job title, I want it to be department. So how will I do that? Very simple. Field outside your pivot table field. So again, how did I do it? So you have your job title. Zoom ko lang po. So you have your job title field. Remove it away from your pivot table field. Okay? And your pivot table should change. So that's approach number one. Approach number two is go to your fields. Okay? Go to the list of the variables and then simply untick or uncheck the job title variable. Okay? So are we good with that? So I'll change it now to department. So same steps. Click, drag, and hold the department into the rows field. So that should change accordingly. All right, questions? I hope you are still able to follow my discussion. All right, now, pro tip, okay? So take note that whenever you are summarizing or dragging fields into the values field, watch out for variables that have numeric values but are considered as categorical variables. Let me repeat that. Whenever you are dragging variables in the values field of your pivot table, watch out for qualitative variables that have numeric values. So obviously, Excel doesn't know that it is indeed a qualitative variable, even if it has a numeric form. So for example, IDs. Okay? In our example, it just so happened that employee ID has a character format. It consists of numbers and letters. But most of the time, we can label IDs as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So it's a number, but still, it is a categorical or qualitative variable. Now, if you put that ID number in the values field, Excel will compute for the sum of that ID number. So of course, you don't want that because you only want Excel to count the ID numbers. So again, pro tip, watch out for qualitative variables that have numeric variables. All right. Now, what else do we have? All right. So let me just go back to the basic pivot table. So I will remove the minimum, the maximum, the average annual salary. So I'll just focus on the counts. Okay. How many employees are in the finance department, human resource department, maintenance, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, what if I don't want counts? I want percentages. Okay. I can change it by simply right click and then show values as. So the show values as options allows you to display results either in percentages, in differences, in rankings, or in terms of indices. All right, so for example, again, let me repeat that step. You're in your pivot table. Click any cell on the table that you want to change the summary. So right click, then show values as. Okay, so click show values as. I will click percent of grand total. So see, you already have the percentages. So if you still want the counts, again, same steps with what I have demonstrated a while ago. Click, hold, and drag employee ID on the values field. Okay, and it should show the actual counts. Okay, can you follow? Any questions? Okay, let me just check the chat box and so there is this question. I cannot drag the annual salary into the values area. I suppose you should click, hold, and drag the values, the annual salary field into the values area. If you cannot do it, sorry, Okay, another option that you can do is you just check the annual salary and it will show in the next column. Okay, so I hope I answered your question. All right. Anyway, so we are already done with dragging fields, changing the summary in terms if it's count, minimum, maximum, average, and showing values differently using percentages. Okay. Another approach that you can do is, say, for example, I want a two-way table. Okay. I want a summary of how many employees are in the finance or are in a specific department and at the same time at a specific job title. So it's a two-way classification table. Say my row category is department and my column category is job title. So if you notice, okay, if we go back to the pivot table fields, we also have a columns area. So you simply click, hold, and drag the column category that you wish to summarize into the columns area. For example, job title, I'll bring it to the columns area. Okay, so see, you have for assistant manager, the count and the percentages. For the laborer, the count and the percentages. And across all categories of your column variable. Okay? If you want it to be more simpler, say for example, let's first remove the percentages so that you can appreciate the change that was made in your pivot table. We have this one. Okay? Similarly, you can interchange them. Say for example, you want department to be in the columns. So just simply click, hold, and drag it to the columns. And then job title, click, hold, and drag to the rows category. Okay? So let me just check the Q&A. Okay, this is a very good question. Nawala po yung pivot table field or the pivot table field went missing. Now here's a pro tip. Whenever you want to analyze or design your pivot table, make sure you are clicked anywhere else on your pivot table. Because if you click a cell outside your pivot table, the tools, the tab will disappear. I hope you saw it in this demonstration. So it's a cell inside the pivot table. The fields are here. The Analyze tab, the Design tab is here. If I click outside it, the Analyze and Design tab disappears. The field pane disappears. All right? Okay. Now, next feature of the pivot table that I would like to share, we have the filter. So for example, okay, let me just go back to the basic table. I'll first remove columns or a department in the columns. So we simply have job title, summary, or frequency table. Now, what if I want a filter variable or filter category for pivot table? I don't want it to look like a two-way table. Okay? So you will notice in your pivot table fields, there is a filter option. So same steps lang po as before. So click, hold, and drag the filter variable that you want to use. Okay? Once again, you have your filters field. Click, hold, and drag. Now, you will notice that there is a filter row that will appear above your pivot table. So in this case, since our filter variable is department, so it will appear with the department label. So you just click the drop-down button and select, do I want it to display based on finance department? Yes. Say, for example, maintenance department, okay? The pivot table changes correspondingly. Now, you can also select multiple items, okay? Just click or tick the select multiple items box. Okay? So once again, that's the drop-down button. Just click the select multiple items box. Okay? So that's the filter. Now, there is another variation of the filter that is actually more user-friendly and has a good or better design as compared to this filter option or filter function. Let me introduce you with a slicer. Okay? What's the slicer? So the slicer acts like your filter, except that if you're commonly using filter, perhaps the slicer is a much better option for you. So how do we activate the slicer command or the slicer button? So on your tabs, take note again, click anywhere on your pivot table to activate the two tabs. So you have your pivot table analyze tab. So under the filter group, you will see an insert slicer command. Again, click anywhere on pivot table, and then under the pivot table analyze tab, click insert slicer. Okay? So insert slicer will have a pop-up window. So the pop-up window will just list all the variables, and you are to select which variable you want to use as a slicer. So in this case, let's have department as the slicer. Okay? So tick department and then click OK. Okay? Let me repeat that. Again, click anywhere on your pivot table analyze tab, filter group, insert slicer, and then tick department. Then click OK. Okay, so I already have this slicer. And watch what will happen if I click on finance. If I click maintenance. If I click sales and marketing. So notice that it really acts like a filter. And at the same time, you can select multiple categories in your filter variable. Just click this multi-select button. So for example, finance and human resource. Okay? Okay? Or another technique is that you can just press the control key in your keyboard. So click finance, control, click human resource. Press control in your keyboard, click maintenance, and so on. Okay? So human resource, manufacturing, and so on. So please try experimenting this. Maybe you can replace it. Okay? Now how can you go back to the previous option? You can just delete this slicer. Okay? So again, how did I do it? Click the slicer window and press delete in your keyboard. Okay? So you might want to explore, how about if I use job satisfaction as the slicer? Okay? So I'll give you time to explore while I'm checking the Q&A box. There's this question, is there a same interface if it's browser version? I am not sure, but if you can't see the slicer button, I think it is not available in the browser version of MS Excel. Oh, there's a very interesting question. If the categories are number format, like student number, for example, as you mentioned, can I count how many are 2018 students and 2019 students? Good question. I'll answer that later on because I will introduce a function in MS Excel in which you can split certain characters or numbers depending on how long you want these characters to be. Okay? All right, so now let's move on to another feature of your pivot table, which allows you to group certain categories if you think they are similar or if you wish to report them indeed as a group. Okay, for example, I want to group assistant manager and manager. So I want to display them all together. So what I will do is that, again, make sure that your pivot table fields and tabs are active. And how do you do it? Again, make sure you're clicked anywhere inside the pivot table. Now go to Pivot Table Analyze tab. Okay. And then select the row categories or row labels that you wish to group. For example, assistant manager and manager. So how do I select them all together? Again, control key in your keyboard helps a lot. So click assistant manager, control key, then click manager. Okay, again, assistant manager, click control key, and then manager. And then on the pivot table analyze tab, you will notice under the groups tab, there is a group selection button. So press this group selection button, and then your pivot table will change accordingly. Say you want to group superintendent and supervisor, same steps, click superintendent, control key in your keyboard, click supervisor, and then go back to the pivot table analyze tab, click group selection. And your pivot table should now change. Okay, questions? Let me check the Q&A box. All right. Now, earlier, I showed that, for example, let's remove all the groups. Okay. Now, suppose, for example, I just don't want counts, averages, minimum, maximum, and other summary statistics. I have a specific formula that I will use in my pivot table. Now, if you will remember, if I right-click this and display show summarized values as, I have limited options. Sum, counts, average, maximum, minimum, and product. And there are other summary statistics that you can explore later on. But what if, again, I have a specific formula for computing the values of a certain column? Now, please take note that pivot tables allow you to do that. And how will you do it? Again, it's in the Pivot Table Analyze tab, and it's under the Fields, Items, and Sets button. So it's the calculated field function. Okay? So it's in the Pivot Table Analyze tab, Fields, Items, and Sets button, calculated field. So you will enter a formula based on how you want the column values to be displayed. So I will skip this because we are not yet discussing the formulas in MS Excel, but at least I was able to inform you that you can customize the computations in your MS Excel. All right. That's it for the pivot table. Let me just check. Okay, how to ungroup po? If you will notice, for example, if I group assistant manager and manager, there is an ungroup option here. Okay, so you just simply click on the group label and then click ungroup button. Okay, so I hope that answered your question. All right, so there is this question. Di po masyadong nakasunod. Again, please take note that in the slides that I will be distributing, all of these steps are there. So for example, how to drag fields. It's complete with screenshots. Okay, so don't worry if you're not able to quickly follow the instructions earlier. Yung show values as natin earlier, the drag fields, the changing of rows, creating a two-way table, adding a filter, adding the slicer. They're all in the slides that I will be distributing later on. Okay, so don't worry. All right, so let's move on to the next portion of data management, and that is on conditional formatting. So conditional formatting actually allows a user to highlight certain cell values based on how they want these cell values to be displayed. So So you have your conditional formatting, and there are several ways on how you can do it. So again, I'll show this demonstration using MS Excel later on. So here are the steps. You simply select the range of values in which you will apply the formatting, and then you will just use the conditional formatting button in the styles group of the home tab. Okay, let's have an example. All right, so let's go back to the employee DB worksheet, this one. Okay, and let us say, what if I want to highlight the employees with belonging to the top 10% highest earning employees? Okay, so say for example, that pertains to the annual salary column. So what I will do, ano na po yung steps kanina, step number 1, highlight the cell or cells that you wish to apply conditional formatting. Now, pro tip. I don't know if you're already aware of this several keyboard shortcuts, okay, but let me just share with you. Please try what happens if you press Control and Spacebar in your keyboard. So Control Spacebar selects the entire column. Okay? Shift Spacebar selects the entire row. So let me repeat that. Control Spacebar selects the entire column. Shift Spacebar selects the entire row. What else? Control plus any of the arrow keys will bring you to the last entry, or to the first entry, or to the leftmost or the rightmost entry of your worksheet. For example, Control Up will bring me to the first row of my data table. Control Down will bring me to the last row of my data table. Same is true if I do Control Left and Control Right. All right, so another pro tip that I would like to share is yung Control Shift plus arrow keys. Okay, so again type ko na lang po baka hindi nasundan. So it's Control Shift plus your arrow keys. What happens with this keyboard shortcut? It allows you to quickly select the entire column or the entire row that has data with it. Okay, so for example, for annual salary, I will click on row number 2 of annual salary, then Control Shift down to select all rows for this column. You able to follow that? Again, click on D2, cell D2, because the first entry for annual salary. Control Shift down, okay? Or Control Shift arrow down. It will now enable you to select all observations in that column. Now, why am I sharing this? Because sometimes it's very tiring to scroll all observations one by one. Okay? It might be very easy for my example because there are only 50 rows. But what if there are 2,000 rows? What if there are 5,000 rows? Okay? So Control Shift down allows you, or any arrow keys allows you to select observations in a row or in a column. Are we good with that? So now, let's go to conditional formatting. So once I have selected this cell, I'll go to the Home tab, Conditional Formatting button, and then I will just select from the list of options that are available. So from the Home tab, this one, okay, Conditional Formatting, then I will just select what rule will apply for my objective. So since I want to highlight the top 10% highest earners in my employee database, I will select the top 10%. Then I can change this, say I don't want top 10%, 20%, and so on and so forth. Then correspondingly, you can change how it will appear in your worksheet. Okay? So since it's the top 10%, perhaps I'll choose green. Okay? So it's because it's the highest earners. Okay? So they are the gainers. So I will select green field with dark green text and then click OK. Now you will notice that this salary values changed their formatting. Okay? Now, what if I made a mistake? Oops, it should not be top 10%. It should be top 25%. Say, for example, how will I remove this formatting? Very easy. Again, highlight the cells wherein you applied a specific formatting. So it's cell number D2 up to D50. So I will go back to the conditional formatting button, and then I will just select clear rules and then clear rules from selected cells. Okay? Again, it's in the conditional formatting button, clear rules from selected cells. Okay? There's an option that you can clear the rules from the entire sheet. But what if you have already applied several conditional formatting rules in your worksheet? So this is not advisable. Okay? So clear rules from selected cells, you will notice that the formatting that we applied earlier actually disappeared. All right, so I'll give you time to explore conditional formatting while I'm checking the Q&A and chat box. For Mac users, let me check first. I'm not very familiar because I am not a Mac user, but let me check, okay? Or maybe our other participants have an alternative for that Control Shift arrow keys trick that I shared earlier. Honestly, I'm not familiar with how it's done in Mac. Alright, okay pa po tayo? Oh, there. May nag-share po, it's command instead of control. So it's command, shift, and arrow keys. Am I right? So control key is substituted with command key. Thank you to our participants. All right. So now we move on to the last topic in our webinar, and this will focus on the basic data analysis that you can do in MS Excel. Okay. Now, once again, please take note, do not expect that I will discuss the different statistical tools because this is not the right webinar for that discussion. So I will just be sharing how we will apply the statistical tools in MS Excel. Okay? Now, first is the MS Excel formulas. So the formula is one of the most powerful features of MS Excel because it allows you to easily display numerical summary measures using formulas and predefined functions. Now, how do we utilize formulas in MS Excel? So all formulas in MS Excel begin with an equal sign. And after the equal sign, it's either you need to type the function name, and most of the time, you need to refer to a cell address. Now, what's the cell address? Simply think of it as the row number and the column number or column category. So for example, is it A1, B1, B25, and so on. And that technique is what we call as cell referencing. Okay? Now, what are the steps? Again, select a certain cell, preferably a blank cell, type an equal sign, and then after that equal sign, apply the formula or the function that I will be discussing earlier. Okay? Now, please take note, if you wish to edit a formula, you can double-click that cell, or you can edit using the formula bar, which I will show later on, if you are not yet familiar. Okay? And always press Escape key if you do not want unwanted editing in your formula. All right. So there are 4 types of operators in MS Excel. These are arithmetic, comparison, text, and reference. I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, have already tried to use arithmetic operators in MS Excel. So these are your addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and exponentiation. You also have your comparison operators, such as the equal, the greater than, the less than, greater than or equal, and the less than or equal. And you also have this specific symbol, the less than, greater than, for the not equal to operator. I'll just show this example later on during the demonstration. And we have your text operator. So the text operator, denoted by the ampersand, allows you to concatenate two values. So let's proceed with the demonstration in MS Excel. All right, so for example, let's just demonstrate the logical operator. So say for example, is this one, E2, equal to 10? True. So take note that your logical operators will have values true or false. Now you might ask this question, sir, what if I don't want the true or false value to be displayed in my worksheet? Later on, there's a function in MS Excel that you can use. All right. Now, is the use of equal sign or is the use of comparison operators exclusive for numeric values? No. Okay. In fact, you can also use comparison operators in text. So for example, is C2 equal to, say for example, human resource. But I'm telling you, this will result to an error. Okay? Why? Because human resource is a text. It's a character. So, in MS Excel, if you are entering a character in the formula or function field, you should enclose it in a quotation marks. Okay? So this one will display 2. All right? And then, for example, let's explore the text operator, the ampersand operator. Say I'll type hello, then world. So if I use the ampersand operator, hello, ampersand, then world, it will now display this value. Now later on, we have a native function for concatenating your or combining your data values in MS Excel. Right? Now, going back to my next slide, cell referencing. This is very important. In fact, most people get confused with cell referencing most of the time. So, by default, all cell references in MS Excel are relative cell references. Meaning, if you change the row number and column number of a certain formula, the cell ranges will adjust accordingly. Now, if you don't want that, maybe this is the solution for your issue. Absolute cell referencing. When you do not want a cell reference to change, or if you do not want that cell reference to move across formulas, you need to apply absolute cell referencing. And that is done using the $sign. So there are 3 ways to do it. First one is the one that uses $sign before the column number and $sign before the row number. So this indicates that the column is locked and the row is locked. So in other words, the cell will not change. Okay? Putting a $sign before the column title or before the column number indicates that the column is locked, but your row will change. On the other hand, putting a $sign before the row number indicates that the row is locked, but the column will change. Okay? Let's have an example for you to appreciate absolute cell referencing. All right, so this time, let's go back to our Excel worksheet or workbook. And let's go to price table. Okay. Once again, we are now on the price table worksheet. And let's try to apply the absolute cell referencing in this table. So we have the following variables or items in our worksheet. So you have your vegetable item, price per kilogram, markdown of 10%, markup of 5%. Say I want to compute the corresponding price given a markdown of 10% and a markup of 5%. So how will I do it? So notice, for example, if I key in a formula that says 90, since it's a markdown minus 90 times 10%. So again, that's 90 minus the 10% of 90, which is computed as P5 times C2. Now, what I'm trying to say earlier is that if you move or if you copy and move this formula across different cells, take note that the cell referencing will change accordingly. Okay? So you might tell me, sir, I will just drag it, bring it to 10%. What will happen if I do it on the third row? So will I do it again, and so on and so forth? So it's very tiring to do, right? And in fact, it will also happen if you move across columns. So this is correct. This should be highlighted, but the cell reference the cell reference for the price, actual price, changed. So how will we do it in MS Excel? Using absolute cell referencing. Once again, allow me to zoom. Okay. Once again, let's explore the first option, locking the entire cell. If I lock the entire cell, so that's putting a dollar sign on before the letter and before the number. Now note that if I move this formula, it will be fixed, right? The B5 reference, the C5 reference will always be the one that will be used for computing the necessary formula. Okay? Now, pro tip in MS Excel, okay, there's actually a shortcut in putting a dollar sign, specifically the dollar sign before and after that letter. So you just simply press F4. Okay, so on your keyboard, press F4 to put dollar sign before and after the letter. Okay, so have you tried that? So F4 here, and then F4. Now it will now change your cell references to absolute cell referencing. Okay, now anyway, I don't want that solution. Okay, because I want the cell references to move across rows and columns. Okay, now let's try. The prices, B5, should not move columns, right? It should always be in column B. In fact, all the prices, original prices, are in column B. So, column B should not move. Column B should be locked. So, where should I put the dollar sign? So, I should put the dollar sign before the column number. So, let's try. So the column got changed. We put it on the next column. The column did not change. All right. So again, guiding principle. All the original prices are in column B. Okay. But they are displayed from row number 5 to row number 12. So in short, row changes, column does not change. So I will lock the column number. Now, how about C2? What absolute cell referencing type will I apply? Now take note, if I copy this formula to the next row, C3 move, right? And for example, in row number 5, if I copy this formula, the appropriate value for the computation move, right? So it's right. So in other words, the row should not change, but the column should change. Again, Since 10% and 5% are placed in different columns and in the same row, so I should freeze the row, but I should allow changes in the columns. So where will I put the dollar sign? It should be before the row number. So if I do it, see? So the row number of the markdown price or the markdown percentage will not change. Okay? Now, similarly, if I do this, I'll just adjust the formula. So this should be plus. Okay? And then copy and paste or drag the values to compute the rest of the prices. So double check. Yes, I did the right computations. Any questions? So I hope that helps. So absolute cell referencing is really helpful, especially if you are using several formula in your worksheet. Now, going back to our discussion, take note that cell referencing can also be done in multiple worksheets. And that's the time, I'm not sure if you have already experienced this, that you will see an exclamation point followed by the worksheet name in the cell reference bar. So MS Excel also allows you to do cell referencing in multiple worksheets. Okay? All right. Now, let's move on to activating useful functions in MS Excel. So in MS Excel, functions are actually predefined formulas that performs calculations. So it would vary from logical operations, referencing operations, mathematical operations, statistical operations. It will follow the same format with your formula. So it is defined using an equal sign, but this time it will now be followed by the function name. Now, the arguments, which are usually placed inside a parenthesis, will now indicate the cell or ranges that will be used in the computation of your function. Now, here are some useful functions. First, for generating descriptive statistics. For the mean, you have average. For the median, as the name implies, you have mode, it's the mode. For the population variance, it's var-p. For the population standard deviation, it's esteemed. But let me share with you that this function name varies depending on the version of your MS Excel. In some versions, this is denoted as var.p and stdev.p. But in some versions, using var.p still works even if the active function name is var.p. Okay? Then you have your minimum value, function name is min, and then maximum value, function name is max. Okay? Now, let's have an example. There you go. So, we go back to the employee DB worksheet. Once again, I'm on the employee DB worksheet. Okay? So, let's go to the last row. And say, for example, let's list down descriptive statistics. The minimum, the minimum, the maximum, the mean, the median, the mode, and the standard deviation. All right. So, how do we impose functions in MS Excel? So, type equal sign, and then the function name. So, notice that it should appear in your cell and in the formula bar. So minimum only requires you to highlight the data values. So let's say we get the minimum annual salary. So let's press the last row. Again, what's the trick? Control, Shift, arrow up. Okay? But take note, the annual salary label was included in the selection. So to avoid that, you just click on or press Shift arrow down in your keyboard. Okay? So once again, I will repeat. So that's equal to minimum, then select the last row, Control Shift arrow up, then shift down to unselect D1. Right? So you have this one. So that's the minimum value. Now let's try to apply cell referencing. Okay? Specifically absolute cell referencing. Okay? Because if I copy this and paste it in the next row, then I will just replace this with maximum. Okay? Obviously, the cell referencing is not correct. So again, applying the principles that I shared with you earlier, what should not change? The row should not change, right? So I will put a $sign before the row number and before the row number on the next cell reference. Okay, so if I do it, then the cell referencing is still correct. Okay, so para mas mabilis, for easier computations, I'll just copy this and paste and just change the function name. Okay, so that I would not type or refer back to the cell references over and over again. Okay, so copy this and paste. Okay, double click and then change this to average for the minimum. Okay, copy this, paste, change this to median. Okay, copy, paste, change this to mode. Copy, paste, change this to stdev. So notice that in my MSL version, it's now stdev.p, but stdev.p still works. Okay? Now you might wonder, why is there a p in the standard deviation? Because it's a population standard deviation. If you're computing values based on samples, you simply need to replace p with s. So it will be stdev s. stdev. Okay? Or stdev.s, depending on the version of your MS Excel. If it's the lower version, it's just stdev. Okay? But if it's the newer version, it should be stdev.s. Okay? Now, this is for annual salary. If I want to summarize the number of years in service, I can just copy this and paste. Is the cell referencing correct? Yes, because I only locked the rows. Okay? I did not lock the columns so that whenever I want to display more summary statistics for different columns, the cell references would adjust accordingly. All right. Okay, so let me just check if there are certain questions in our Q&A and chat box. All right, so going back, here are other useful statistical functions. You have your count, which simply counts the number of cells in a range that contains non-empty numbers or non-empty values. And you have your count A that counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. Okay? Other variations, you have your count if. It works the same way with count, except that you now have a criteria. Don't worry, I will show examples later on. All right, so let's explore the count if function in MS Excel. So, say for example, counts. How many employees do we have? So, equal sign, count, open parenthesis, and then highlight again the cells. Okay? But since you're already done with that, I can just copy this and paste and just replace stdevp with count. Okay? Now, let's just explore yung count A. Okay? Count A counts the number of cells that are non-empty, right? So, for example, same cell reference, I will just include A, okay, to count the number of cells that are not empty, and it's still 49. Since if you will look in our worksheet, we have a complete set of observations. there is another variation of the count, and it's the missing values. So it can be activated using the keyword or function name count blank. Okay? So the count blank will count the number of cells that are empty. And in this case, it's 0. Okay? Now you might wonder, sir, it might not be working. Oh, let's try. So for example, let's delete this observation. So there's one missing observation, and then there are a total of 48 non-empty observations. All right? So you can still do it here, there. Okay? Now, let's try count if. Okay? Say for example, I want to count the number, or let's focus on the average number of years. So say for example, I want to focus on those employees whose years of service is equal to 10. Okay? I will count the number of employees whose years of service is equal to 10. So in MS Excel, that can be done using the COUNTIF function. So COUNTIF, first argument is the range of values. So what is the range of values? This cell up to this cell. Okay, so you have your COUNTIF. First argument is okay. Criteria. What would be my criteria? I intend to count the number of employees whose years of service is 10. So if I MS Excel, I will just inspect each and every row that is equal to 10. So I will put the value 10 as the second argument. So COUNTIF, the cell reference, and then the value. So that's fine. Okay. So does COUNTIF works only for numeric values? No. COUNTIF also works for characters, such as this one. Say for example, I count the number of employees who are supervisors. Okay? So how will I do it? Again, equals COUNTIF, highlight the cells, comma, to separate the two arguments, and then the criteria. So I will count supervisors, so I will type supervisor. But this will again result in an error. Why? Because again, supervisor is a character, so you should enclose it in a quotation mark. So there are two supervisors. All right? So I'll give you time to explore. For example, how about annual salary? How about the department, the satisfaction rating? Okay, I'll just read some questions in the Q&A. Okay, very good question. Sir, what if I would like to know from 10 to 25 years range? Or what if I have a range of values that I would want to count? Okay, for example, I want to count how many employees have services or have served my company for at least 10 years. Okay, obviously, if you do COUNTIF, okay, so COUNTIF and then select the range. And then the argument is that it should be greater than or equal to 10. I cannot put it this way. Okay? This will result in an error. Okay? Excel will tell you that there is a problem with your formula. So, pro tip. I hope this will be useful for everyone. Okay? Because whenever I'm sharing this, there is this eureka moment. Okay? So, the pro tip is you will enclose your comparison operator in quotation marks. So in this case, my comparison operator is greater than or equal. So I will enclose it in a quotation mark. Okay? And then after that, I will put the ampersand sign. Okay? Let's try if it will work. 23 employees. Good. Okay? So another one. Sige po, let's have another example. Say, let's go to salary. This one. So I want to count the number of employees whose salary is, say, greater than or less than. Okay, let's change our operator to 30,000. Okay, so that's count if. Okay, so that's count if. Highlight the cell ranges. So that's for salary, comma, to enter the second criteria. So less than 30,000. So put your logical operator in quotation marks, followed by ampersand, followed by the numeric value. So 30,000. So, so 0. Okay, let's change it. Baka put, okay, say 40,000. Why? Sorry. Aha. 0 or less than 40,000. Tama. Sorry, I was just, yeah. I should add another 0. Yan. Okay. So say, this is not 30,000, this should be 300,000. Yan. Okay, slight panic. Okay, so there you have it. So I hope that's useful because I find it useful most of the time. So instead of constructing pivot tables, I can just quickly count the number of observations depending on a certain range. All right. So at the same time, there's another math function that is very useful in MS Excel, and that is the round option. So say you want to round off your observations to the nearest decimal place. I understand that you already know that it can be done using formatting. Okay? But take note that if you compute certain formulas, it will not adjust accordingly. So you still need to seek the help of round, and it has this syntax equals round, and then simply select the number and how many decimal places do you want. So for example, in this mean value of 10.77551, I only want to display it in one decimal place. So that's 10.8. If I want to round it off to the nearest full number, I will just put 0 as the second argument. So say 3 decimal places, it should modify its formatting. All right. All right. So again, if you forgot that pro tip in the comparison or in the count if function, I again included in my slide. All right. So here, that's the round function. Next, you have your logical functions. So the if is very useful, specifically if you want to modify the value assigned if the condition is true or if the condition is false. Okay? There's a variation of the if function that says or that includes more than one condition, and it's the ifs function. Because take note that the if condition is only exclusive for one condition. If you have more than one condition, you can use the ifs function, but please take note, this is only available in the new versions of MS Excel. Okay? And there's another variation of the if function, which is the if error, which returns a value if MS Excel encountered an error in the computation of your function or formula. Okay? Then, I will just proceed to the next portions because my next demonstration will involve all of these functions. So you have your upper, which converts your text string to all uppercase letters. So amazing. So I don't need to retype all the characters or all the texts in my worksheet for it to be in all uppercase letters. Variations, you have your lower that will convert your text string to lowercase letters, and you have your proper, which converts your text string in such a way that the first letter of every word is capitalized. You have your find. It finds the starting position of one text string with another text string. All right, so let me just, sorry. Oops. Okay, let's proceed with a demonstration. Let's proceed with a demonstration of the if first. Okay, so let's say, for example, I will include a variable, say, bonus receive. Okay, so it simply tells you that if your, let me just outline it here, if your years is greater than 10, you will receive a bonus. Otherwise, you will not receive a bonus. Okay, so how will I do it? So take note, okay, that if you do the logical operators a while ago, like checking if this is greater than 10, it will just display a true or false value. So if you want to customize that, you can use the if function. So if this value is greater than 10, what will be the value if it is true? So the second argument is always the value if the resulting condition says true. So let's write bonus. And if it is false, I will write no bonus. Okay? So, obviously, since the number of years is 10, it will result to no bonus. How about the next one? Since it's greater than 10, the employee will receive bonus, and so on. All right? So, next, let's demonstrate the if, error, the upper, and the find functions. Okay? So, for example, let's add another column that says, I want to know which employees have satisfied ratings. So, it's either satisfied or highly satisfied ratings. Okay? And then differentiate it with those employees who scored unsatisfied in terms of their job satisfaction. So first, let's check. How will I do it? So if I say, use the if statement, okay? So if this, say, is equal to satisfied, it will say return a value of 1. Otherwise, it will return a value of 0. Okay? Will this work? Interestingly, for the first few, it will work. Okay? Because obviously, they are not satisfied. But let's try it for row number 9. Will it work? No. Okay? Take note that this assignment is totally wrong. Because, as you have said earlier, we want to differentiate employees who have highly satisfied and satisfied ratings from those who have unsatisfied ratings. So the if statement does not work. Okay? So what else can we do? Okay? So here's the point wherein the find function will become useful. Okay? So the find function works in this way. Okay? So you need to find what is the text that I will look for in a certain cell. In this case, I will look for the value that says satisfied. Am I right? And then, second argument, what is the cell reference? In this case, this is my cell reference. Okay? The third option is just optional. Let's try. Now, where did this value come from? 7. Now, if we go back to the discussion earlier, to the definition of find, The find reveals or returns the starting position of the text that you are looking. In this case, since I'm looking at satisfied, notice that we count it starting from the first position. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the S in the word satisfied is in the 7th position. So that's why it's 7. Now, let's confirm it. Okay? Why is the value here resulted to an error? Because basically, take note, this is case sensitive. So I inputted lowercase letters satisfied and it did not recognize it in this. But how about this? It recognized it. In fact, it's in the 12th position. You will notice that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right? Now, going back, okay, then we can further improve this, okay, by changing the formatting of this specific cell. Okay? For uniformity purposes, I would want to change it to uppercase letters. Okay? So I will just include the upper function. Okay? And then I will change this accordingly to match the highly satisfied rating. So if you will notice, it appears as space, then satisfied. In this case, for the 2 dash satisfied, it also appears as the space satisfied. In this way, I will not consider unsatisfied ratings as satisfied ratings. Okay? And then change this into all caps since I forced the cells to be in uppercase. So, the first or the second row is already an error because Excel cannot find space all caps satisfied in this all caps value. But how about this one? Oh, it's already correct. It's in position 11. It's in position 4. Okay? Now, it varies. So what if I would just like to assign 1, 0? 1 if satisfied, 0 if not satisfied. Then that's the time that I will use a little bit of arithmetic operation in this formula so that if I found an index number or a starting position for that satisfaction rating, I will just divide it to its own so that it will result to a value of 1. We're able to follow that. For example, in here, okay, the original is, it has a value of 11. But since this is highly satisfied, so it's satisfied rating, I want it to display as 1. So what I will do is just to divide 11 by its number, so it will become, so I will just copy and then copy the former formula and then divide it and then paste the formula. So it will now become 1. Okay? But how about this one? The H2, it's still an error. So combining it with another function, which we discussed earlier, the if error. Okay? So if this is an error, I will just display 0. Okay? And finishing this function will now give you 0, 1, 0, 1 values. Okay. So I think it's a bit tiring to understand, but this is the example that I think will be useful in terms of these functions, the if error, the upper, and the find. Okay? But if you have other applications of these functions, please feel free to share so that others may also learn from it. Okay? All right, so that's the find. Then you have your concatenate. So this works with in the same way with your ampersand operator. Okay, so it just joins several text strings and combines it into one text string. Then you have your replace. It replaces part of a text string with a different text string. And finally, for your text function, you have your length. Okay, let's have a demonstration of the two. Okay. Let's try to explore the replace function. So one of the most useful applications of the text functions of the replace function is if you are reformatting certain cell values. So for example, cell phone numbers. For example, yeah. Now you would want that this cell phone number be displayed using this format. Okay. Now what should I do? So again, here's the trick for replace. Okay. So replace, what's the old text? This one. Okay. What's the starting position of the number that you want to replace or the character that you want to replace? In our case, let's count it. 63917 dash 123. Then 4. Okay, so there should be a dash before 4. So it's in the 10th position. So the second argument is 10. And then the pro tip is that if you want to insert values, the number of characters should be set to 0. And the thing that you will replace is dash. Okay, so once again, replace, first argument is the old text. Second argument is the starting position of the text that you want to replace. Third argument is the length of the character or number that will be replaced. But the trick is, if you want to insert instead of replace, set the third argument to 0. And then, the fourth argument is the character or number that will be replaced, or the character or number that will act as replacement. So, this one, you have now reformatted your cell value. Okay? For example, okay. So say, hello world. You want to replace this as hi world. So, replace, the old text is hello world. Okay? Starting position. Okay, hello world. Obviously, it's in the first position. How many characters does hello have? Hello, 5 characters. I will replace it with hi. So, it's now hi world. Okay? And finally, you have your length function, okay, which just simply counts the number of characters. In this case, it's 8. If I do it for the other one, say for this one, hello world, the length is 11. All right. So I'll give you time to explore the replace, the length. All right. And this is the last function that I would like to share. And this is on the lookup function, which is one of the most useful functions in MS Excel. So the situation is, what if I have a certain value that can be relabeled or recategorized in terms of another variable or another characteristic? Then that relabeling or recategorizing is found in another array or is found in another table. So the lookup is very useful for such scenarios. Now take note that in MS Excel, there are a lot of variations of the lookup. You have the VLOOKUP, you have the age lookup, and just recently, Excel launched the X lookup. So for you to learn the V, the H, and the X lookup, you first need to understand the basic lookup. Okay? So how does lookup works? Okay. So I will just delete this unnecessary values. All right. So what if we have this condition? Okay. Still on bonus. Okay. If the employee is between 0 to 9 years in the company, he will not receive a bonus. If the employee is between 10 to 19 years in the company, he will receive 10% bonus. If he or she is between 20 to 29 years, 20% bonus. And above 30 or 30 and above, he or she will receive 30% bonus. Okay. So I will create another column entitled bonus, and this should display the percentage of bonus that the employee will receive based on his or her number of years in service. Okay? So what we will do, again, we will seek the help of the lookup function. Okay? But before that, you need to set up your array. Okay? In this one, column L consists of characters. Okay? But you are going to reference it with a numeric value, yung number of years. Okay? Now, pro tip, if you're looking at ranges and you want to apply the lookup function, always use the minimum or the lower limit as your row name or row category. So in this case, 0 to 9 years will be translated to 0, 10 to 19 years will be translated to 10, 20 to 29 years to 20, and 30 and above years to 30. So in this case, it's as if I'm telling Excel, if the number of years is between 0 to 9, it's 0%. If it's 10 to 19, it's 10%. If it's 20 to 29, it's 20%. If it's 30 above, it's 30%. Okay? So, I'm now ready to set up or to use the lookup function. So, lookup, first value is the lookup value. First argument is the lookup value, which is the number of years. That's in column E. Second argument is the lookup array. Okay? So, the lookup and result array. If your resulting array is just consisting of 2 columns, okay, you can just simply highlight the entire 2 columns. Okay? But if you want to be more specific, you can first select the lookup vector and then separate it with a comma and then the resulting vector. But again, an easier approach is to just highlight the 2 columns. So Excel assumes that the 2 columns are formatted in such a way that the first column is the lookup vector and the second column is the resulting vector. All right? So in this case, it will now display 0.1 corresponding to 10% because the number of years is 10%. Okay? Now, if I copy this formula, we'll still display a correct answer, but if you double click it, the cell reference changed. So once again, this is the time that you need to change your cell references to absolute cell references. Okay, so which cell reference will we change into absolute reference? Take note that it should be the array. Okay, because the lookup value should change from one row to another. So this should be changed into absolute references. So notice that the cell reference for the array did not change. Okay, so rewind po. Let's repeat. So that's equals lookup. Okay, the lookup value, this one. Okay, what value will I look in my data table, comma, second array, where will I look at these values? So it's this array. And then change the cell reference of your array into absolute reference. So there you have it. Okay? Just some quick reminders, pro tip, in setting up your array, make sure that your lookup vector is sorted from highest to lowest or from A to Z. I repeat, when setting up your array, make sure that your lookup value is sorted from highest to lowest from lowest to highest or from A to Z. Okay, so again, that's from lowest to highest or from A to Z. This one, your lookup vector. All right, so last two topics, since we are running out of time, so I will just quickly share with you some very interesting points on the next topics. So charting, okay? And I'm sure this is not the first time that you will create charts in MS Excel. So, and I've discussed a lot about charts last webinar. So here's one thing that is very interesting in MS Excel. The pivot table is actually connected to another function or to another feature that is called as the pivot chart. And the pivot chart is simply a representation of your pivot table. Now, the good thing about pivot chart is that if you make changes in your pivot table, the pivot chart will adjust accordingly. Well, of course, that is also true whether you are creating charts outside of MS Excel. Okay? Now, here's a pro tip. Sometimes it is difficult or confusing to create charts using pivot charts. So what you can do is to just copy your pivot table and then paste it to another worksheet and create a chart outside that pivot table. Okay? Now, let's just quickly show how to activate the pivot chart in MS Excel. Now, I hope the pivot table sheet is still active. Okay? So this is the pivot table that we created a while ago. So the pivot chart can be seen in the Pivot Table Analyze tab. Okay? Once again, if you are seeing these tabs, make sure you are clicked anywhere else on the pivot table. Okay? So you have your pivot chart on the right side. So this one. So click pivot chart, and then the usual window will appear, similar with how you insert or create charts in MS Excel. So say for example, I will select this horizontal bar chart, and you have this very interesting chart of MS Excel. Okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it would be difficult or confusing to modify or to format the pivot chart in MS Excel. For example, why are there buttons showing in my chart area? Okay? If you don't want these buttons, just right-click that button and then select Hide All Field Buttons. Again, if you don't want these field buttons, right-click and then Hide All Field Buttons. Okay? Now, notice that, say for example, if I change the row category and I do consider department, it's unfiltered, filtered. Yeah. If I consider department, the pivot chart will adjust accordingly. So for example, if I consider job satisfaction, it should now change. Okay? Now, you might wonder that earlier in our example, we included new columns, bonus satisfied, bonus received. Okay? Now, how will that reflect in the pivot chart field? Here's a very important reminder. In the pivot chart analyze tab, always refresh your data source. Okay? So if I refresh this, take note that some of the categories that we have or data columns that we have included earlier might change. But in some conditions, like this one, there are excess columns, so you need to change your data source. So it will just be easier for you because the change data source button is just beside the refresh button. Okay? But say for example, if very simple changes were just made in your data table, say for example, you change this into 20, okay? So you just need to click the refresh button in the pivot chart analyze tab. Okay? Now, similar with my reminders last webinar, please do not trust MS Excel default charts. As you can see, there are several issues with this graph. Okay? First, we can omit this table, this figure title. We can just put it outside of MS Excel. This legend has no use. Okay? Now, can you notice that the font color is not 100% black? Oh, see? I think most people do not recognize this, but the default MS Excel font color for charts is not 100% black. In fact, it is 35% lighter. Okay? So always change it to 100% black. Okay? See the difference? So here's the original or the default chart. Then here's the 100% black font color. Okay? So please do find time to modify the MS Excel default charts. Okay? Aside from that, please please consider changing the font style. Okay? You don't want Calibri. Okay? Say perhaps we use Arial. Okay? What else? Last webinar, I told everyone that for bar charts, the spaces in between bars should be 1/2 of the bar width. So it should be gap width, setting it into 50%. Okay? In fact, I actually shared how to do it in MS Excel last time, if you can still remember. So take note, right-click the bar, format data series, and then change the gap width to 50%. Okay? Now, you might also want considering changing the fill color of the bars. Okay? That is, if you really want to use another color. Okay? Plus, unknowingly, some of you might not notice that the charts in MS Excel has a useless default border color. Okay? Can you notice that? If we zoom into a specific portion of this map, there is this border color. Okay? Sometimes this border color distracts your material. So please find time to remove that outline color. Okay? So that should be easy if you're already familiar with the formatting functions of Excel. So that can be found in the Format tab and just change the shape outline into no outline. All right. So again, those reminders are listed in this slide. So pro tip, do not trust Excel default charts. And ultimately, the strong message that I said last time, say no to 3D charts. Okay? So lastly, you have your MS Excel add-ins, okay, which you can use to analyze your data. Now, in the interest of time, okay, don't worry, I will just skip this part because the steps in activating the MS Excel add-ins are reflected in the slide. In fact, it's complete with screenshots. Okay. Now, just for information purposes, there's an MS Excel default add-in installed in your accounts, and that is the Analysis Tool Pack. Okay. The Analysis Tool Pack actually allows you to conduct several analysis ranging from descriptive statistics up to tests of hypothesis. But then again, as I have mentioned earlier, this is not the right webinar for me to discuss the different statistical methods because this is the webinar intended for using MS Excel for data analysis. All right. Now, I would like to end this one with this statement that I often hear from one of our senior faculty in Instat. She said, statistics is a toolbox. And I definitely agree that statistics is really a toolbox. It consists of several methods. It consists of several techniques. But take note that it is not enough that you have the tool. Okay? It is very important that you know when and how to use a certain statistical tool before actually applying it. So that is the very basic reason why I chose not to discuss in detail how to perform t-test in MS Excel, how to perform ANOVA in MS Excel, because I might get that impression that whatever kind of data I have, I can easily perform t-test, ANOVA, and several other statistical tests. Okay? Remember that these statistical tests have several assumptions and data considerations before actually applying it. Okay? So bottom line is, do not abuse MS Excel. Okay? Always start with exploring your data. That is why I started my discussion with a review of basic statistics. Because in MS Excel, it's very easy for you to compute average values of quantitative variables expressed in numbers. Okay? But come to think of it, is it logical? Is it useful? Okay? So always remember, know when and how to use a statistical tool before applying it. Okay? Now, since online selling is the new normal, please allow me to do online selling, and I will promote our statistical consulting services because I understand that maybe some of you really have questions pertaining to statistical methods that I might not be able to answer it during this webinar because I'll only be entertaining questions related to MS Excel. So the Institute of Statistics UP Los Baños offers statistical consulting services through our Instant Statistical Consulting Group. So you may visit our Facebook page or you may send us an email if you really need a statistical consultant for your research study or for your research project. Okay? So, ang dami ko pa po sanang gustong i-discuss. I have a lot more to discuss. But due to the interest of time, and maybe it's already information overload for some of you, so I'd like to end my discussion with a message of thanks. So for those who attended the first webinar and this second webinar, thank you very much for lending your time and your effort in listening to me and following me through my demonstration examples. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Enzo. Wow, that was 2 hours or 2 hours and a half. A very informative and very helpful discussion on how to manage and analyze data using Excel. Thank you for patiently teaching us step by step, sir. Thank you so much. We were very amazed with how you can really analyze data by using Excel. It's a bit information overload for some. Our brain cells really did well this morning, right? So if you guys are still with us until now, congratulations. Congratulations, everyone. Calvin and FB said this should be an entire subject. So, well, I don't know how to say that, to comment about that, but really learned a lot from this. So just to acknowledge, we have a mix of undergrad and graduate students who joined us for this webinar. We also have alumni, professionals, teachers, and professors from different agencies, government agencies, and private sectors as well. So would you agree, guys? Did you learn something new today? I hope so. We really hope so that you feel like a pro now in using Excel. So in reality, well, it takes really practice to be familiar with Excel. But sabi nga, di ba, practice makes one an expert. Char. Okay, so now before we proceed with question and answer, but due to limited time, we will only be selecting one question overall. But anyway, Sir Enzo he was able to address your questions while he was discussing a while ago. So before we proceed with question and answer, we would like to take this opportunity to thank our very kind resource speaker. Let us please show the screen from Josh's end. All right, let me just read the citation. For the certificate of appreciation for Sir Enzo, University of the Philippines Los Baños Learning Resource Center present this certificate of appreciation to John Lorenzo A. Yambot for serving as resource speaker in the second session on data management and analysis, Use Excel like a Pro, in the webinar series entitled Making Sense of Data, a practical guide in managing, analyzing, and visualizing research findings, held today, July 3, 2020, given this third day of July 2020 at Learning Resource Center, UPLB College Laguna, signed by our director, Benjamina Polo G. Flor. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you po.
Also, please receive this humble e-token. Lahat to, sir, after na ng after na ng community quarantine. So, we believe you love a lot of plants, sir, aside from Malagos chocolate. So, Ito po. Madami po nito din sa office namin. Okay. All right. So for we just have one question, sir, dito po. Na mukhang na-oversee. A question from, let me just check. Yeah. Is there a pivot table in Google Sheets? Is it working the same with the regular or normal Excel version?
Let me just quickly check. I think yes. There is a pivot table in Google Sheets. Okay, but I believe since I know you will agree, in some instances there are functionalities in MS Excel that are not available in Google Sheets. So maybe the pivot table in Google Sheets have limited functionalities as compared with what we have in the Microsoft version.
Okay, thank you, sir. And we also have here people who raise their hands. We apologize that we will be only acknowledging just one. So may we call on Ma'am Blasilda Calog to please raise her question? Yes, Ma'am Blasilda.
Ma'am, kindly unmute your microphone.
Yeah, are you with us still, ma'am? Ma'am Blasilda? Oh, okay. Let's move on to another one. Ma'am Norma Medina. You still have your question, ma'am? Oh, okay. All right, so maybe, sir, that's all about it. Okay, so just a reminder for everyone, if you still have questions, just please leave them on our comment box for the FB Live because Sir Enzo will definitely get back to you. He will be able to answer that after the webinar, just like what he did last session. So again, feel free to leave your comments or questions in our FB Live. And he also showed his contact numbers or email address. So if you want to get in touch with him, so feel free to email Sir Enzo. And for those asking for the copy of Sir Enzo's slide presentation, both for sessions 1 and 2, they will be sent to you along with the PowerPoint slides for today's webinar. Okay, so if you definitely registered in the Google Forms and through Google Zoom, they will be sent to you afterwards. Okay, and just a reminder for the evaluation, Sir Enzo will be showing the last slide containing the link for the evaluation form. Let me just remind you guys to please do not forget to answer this right after the webinar to secure your certificates. The link will be shown by Sir Enzo, so make sure that you answer it. And likewise, please make sure that you indicate in the evaluation form your correct and working email. Okay, that means you have access to the email, you are actively using the email, you know the password to your email, and most importantly, you provided email is correctly spelled. Otherwise, you will not receive the e-certificate. So we noticed that some of you were not able to receive their e-certificates because they provided us with a down email. All right. And certificates, once again, will be issued only to registered participants, to those who finish this webinar, and to those who will accomplish the evaluation form. And we would like to ask your understanding as well. Please bear with us if you still haven't received your e-certificate after attending the webinar, since the influx of participants accessing the form is causing a lag in processing the e-certificates. But rest assured, our team will be working on it. All right. So are there any more questions? Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for those who participated in this webinar series. Sir Enzo, thank you so much for making this possible, sir. Thank you for agreeing to it.
Thank you very much. Po.
And thank you to those who attended from FB Live and from Zoom. Until now, we still have 431 participants in Zoom, while in FB Live, I think yeah, 500 something. I also saw 600 something a while ago, 600 something participants in our Zoom webinar. So thank you so much, everyone. If you still are in need of any training, just please get in touch with Team LRC, hashtag Team LRC. On behalf of our director, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for making this a great success for every one of us. Thank you, Sir Enzo. Thank you, Ma'am Bench. Thank you, Sir John of ITC, for patiently uh, guiding us along the way. Sir Manyaol, Director of ITC. Ma'am Portia Lapitan, our Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. And my newly hired colleague, Josh. Ayan, thank you very much for for being with us as well. So thank you, guys. God bless you all and keep safe.